Every day for the thief, one day for the owner. An inquiry right now suggests that they may be catching up with men who thought the forest would protect them. My people, the headline is this. Military airstrikes and ground troops have hit suspected terrorist and kidnapper hideouts in Kwara State. And in this video, I'll give you the timeline, how it happened, and what it means next. If you want accountability and real updates that affect real communities, like this video and subscribe to Trend Fusions. When security is everybody's business, silence is expensive. On January 24, 2026, coordinated air and ground operations targeted criminal camps across parts of Kwara State, with attention on Ifelodun, Edu, and Patigi local government areas. Reports from the operational theater say the strikes hit hideouts around the Babasangu axis in Ifelodun, Gubu Forest in Edu, and Lata community area in Patigi, areas locals have repeatedly linked to kidnappings and armed raids. Now, to understand why this matters, you need the backstory that brought Kwara to this point. For months, communities in parts of Kwara have lived with the fear that a normal journey can turn into ransom talk. Farmers hesitant to go far into their fields, traders watching the road before they load goods, families adjusting daily routines because anything can happen. When criminals establish camps in hard-to-reach terrain, they don't just attack, they study patterns, pick targets, and punish resistance. Kwara has not been short of warning signs. In late September 2025, after a deadly attack in Okod in Ifelodun, the Nigerian Air Force said it carried out reconnaissance and close air support missions across locations including Kakihu, Okod, and Babla to deter threats and support ground forces. Around that same period, Patigi also saw reports of raids and distress calls, with security agencies responding and trying to track the attackers. And it wasn't only air activity. In Ifeodun, there were reports of stepped-up ground actions, checkpoints, patrols, arrests, and interceptions after weapons were allegedly seized and suspected couriers for kidnapping gangs were picked up with supplies. In one reported interception, 6 AK-47 rifles were said to have been found concealed in a vehicle along the Shari axis, while raids were also reported around Babasango and nearby routes. So, fast forward to this week's update, and you can see why the military is going after camps, not just chasing criminals on the road. Here is the timeline as it has been reported step by step so you can see it clearly. First, the problem grows into a pattern. Communities and travelers report repeated kidnappings and attacks tied to rural routes and forest corridors, especially along areas described as the Kwara-Naija axis. That phrase matters because it signals movement across boundaries. Criminals using forests, waterways, and ungoverned stretches to dodge patrols and rebuild after raids. Second, security forces begin tightening the net. More patrols, more intelligence-led arrests, and more pressure on supply chains. Because let's be honest, kidnappers don't run on prayer. They run on fuel, food, motorcycles, safe houses, and collaborators who whisper, "They are coming." Third, the posture shifts toward hitting bases. The reported operations combine aerial strikes with ground maneuvers to disrupt logistics, scatter fighters, and destroy structures used as operational hubs. On January 24, 2026, reports say multiple camps were struck at once: Babasango in Ifelodun, Gubu Forest in Edu, and Lata in Patigi, forcing many suspects to flee and weakening their positions. Fourth, the military's warning turns blunt. One report describes the offensive under the label Operation India, saying it put the criminals in disarray and displaced them from their positions, but also stressing that progress is being slowed by informants within local communities who allegedly leak troop movements. And my people, that allegation is not small, because when criminals get early notice, they don't just escape, they regroup and come back angry. Now, let me explain the how in simple English, because this is where many people get confused. Airstrikes in this kind of operation are designed to reach deep forest locations quickly, hit fixed camps, and disrupt movement. Ground troops then do the harder, slower work, moving in, clearing the area, searching for weapons and supplies, and holding key points so the criminals cannot simply return the next night. The goal is not noise. The goal is to deny these groups a safe haven. And here's the short rhyme for this moment. Bad roads, bad men, bad tears. Good intel turns the tide. That's why the same reports are urging residents and community leaders to identify informants and report suspicious activity. The public role here is not vigilantism, it is timely information that helps security agencies act before families become bargaining chips. So what are the stakes, both for the people directly affected and for the wider public? For residents of Edu, Ifelodun, and Patiji, this is about daily life, getting children to school safely, moving produce to market, and sleeping without fear. For Kwara State, it is about whether rural corridors remain productive and livable, or whether insecurity keeps pushing people away from farms, small businesses, and community life. What happens next if the pressure is sustained is usually one of two outcomes. Either these groups fracture and become easier to police, smaller cells, fewer camps, less bold movement, or they relocate, reopen routes elsewhere, and return when attention.
Now, here's a question I want you to answer in the comments with sense and with solutions. When security reports say local informants are sabotaging operations, should communities face stronger consequences for shielding them? Or should government focus more on witness protection, rewards, and safe reporting channels? Zooming out, there's a wider implication Nigerians should not ignore. First, it signals that security efforts in parts of North Central are increasingly adopting a coordinated playbook. Air assets plus ground maneuvers aimed at denying armed groups safe havens. Second, it highlights a governance problem in forested and border-adjacent spaces. When the state is absent or slow, criminals exploit the vacuum and ordinary people pay the price. This also connects to another uncomfortable truth. Some groups try to do more than raid. They try to control territory and dictate behavior. In 2025, reporting on a militant faction known as Mahmuda described claims of extortion and taxes, enforcement of local rules, and growing influence in parts of Kwara's northern belt, including communities around the Kainji Lake National Park area. Whether it is that faction or another network on the broader corridor, the lesson is the same. Once armed groups start acting like rulers, they become harder to dislodge, and that is why these operations must be sustained. On the local and people angle, reports say residents in affected areas are being urged to stay vigilant and to speak up about moles who leak troop movement while operations continue to push criminal elements out of their positions. Communities have also been encouraged to report suspicious individuals and movements quickly as troops maintain pressure and expand clearance efforts across surrounding forests and border communities. Let's close with what we can rely on right now. As of January 24, 2026, multiple reports say coordinated airstrikes and ground troops targeted camps in Babasango, Ifelodun, Gobu Forest, and Lataji in Patiji, destroying several camps and forcing suspects to flee with reports of injuries and neutralization of some elements. The same reports emphasize that operations are ongoing and that informants within communities are a major obstacle the military says must be confronted. What we're watching next is straightforward. Whether security agencies release clearer operational updates, whether arrests